let's say I have a scenario like, let's suppose I will start some container like Nginx or Tomcat, whatever. Let's suppose this is my EC2 instance. On this, I'm going to start a container. Let's say container name is C1, which is running Nginx. Let's say, which is running Nginx. Okay, and this is a EC2 instance. Okay, this is running the Nginx container, which is running on port 80, right? So I just want to forward this. I want to do a port forwarding. Okay, forward this to some port 9090, right? So let's say I'm forwarding this Nginx container to some port 9090. Your application is okay. First of all, I wouldn't forward this. Okay, let me tell you. Okay, first let me begin from here. Nginx, it's running on 80. So every container will be having some IP address. So if I hit this IP on 80, I would be seeing Nginx. Correct? This is pretty much straightforward. But can I also see the Nginx here? If I hit this EC2 on some IP address, can I see Nginx? Some port actually. EC2's IP, let's say EC2 IP, hit this on some port or else on port 80. Can I see Nginx or not? I'm repeating, I'm having a container which is coming from Nginx image, and so it's running on port 80. So if I hit that container IP on port 80, I would see Nginx service, which is pretty straightforward. Now, because it's running on my EC2, can I also hit the EC2 IP and access Nginx on this port? Is this
No.
possible? Why
Yeah,
not?
possible, but currently not.
In the sense, if I run straight away, is it possible or not?
Yes, it is possible.
Why, how it's possible?
By transferring the port.
I
I'm
think we
talking
need to enable that port.
I'm talking about just I started this container, okay, and I'm trying to access it on EC2. Is it available or not? Is it accessible or not?
No, ma'am. But first, we need
No,
to add rule on in the security, this energy and network security group.
Is that the only thing? If I add the role, if they add the security rule of 80, can I access it?
no, ma'am.
No, madam.
Why not?
Because the Nginx is uh, running in a container 80 port, not in the EC2 instance.
Like why? Okay, fine. Let's say port is different, but why we can't access it? Okay, to a certain extent, it's true. We cannot access the containers outside. Your containers, whenever you create, they'll be created in a separate, isolated, private network for security reasons. Let's say network 1. Your EC2 instance is another network 2. So whatever containers running, like whatever services they're running, whatever logs they have, cannot be accessed from outside. It's not available, like you cannot access from outside. Right? That's for security reasons, and that's a best practice. That's how it works. But let's suppose I have some address book application. I want to share this end users. I want to share that endpoint to the end users. So how do we do that? Okay, first let me show this use case. Like it's not accessible, then I'll go for that. How to make it available. So I'm running Nginx, Docker run -itd Nginx. Okay, Nginx will be searched locally. If it's not available, it will pull from hub. I did not give any tag name, so it will use the tag name latest and it will pull this image. Docker images. Okay. Docker PS. So this is what we have, right? This is the Nginx image and this is the container. Okay, so from this Nginx, we are having the container started, but okay, it's running on port 80 if you see. Also, if you want to see more details of a container, Docker inspect D79. So if you inspect it, it's running on the bridge network and this is the IP address if you see. Okay, and you can do curl on this IP address. Every container will be assigned with IP. So it's perfect, right? Can you also access this on the same machine like local host? on the EC2, right? Can I do this? It will not work. Even on the browser, it will not work. Even though you add the security rule, it will not work. Let me also clarify anyone having such doubts. It's not about the port because it's not running on the host directly. It's running inside the container. Hope you are all following. If you are not following at any point, feel free to stop me and ask your questions or put your concern. So it will not be, right? So, okay, fine. Because they're all running in a separate private isolated network called bridge network. That's a Docker network. So you can't exit. Let's suppose I want to expose this to the external world. Then you have to expose that port to EC2. Then you can, means it's like a port mapping in Linux. So let me go here. How do you do that? Can I do for this container which is already created? I can't do anything here. You have to do this whenever you start a new container. You can't do for already created ones. Use capital P, right? Run ITD P. P is for port forwarding, right? So So 32768 for forwarding 82 32768. It's forwarded to some port called 32768. You may also inspect this Docker inspect 10E. So if you inspect it, it's on this particular port. Right here it will work, but what about on the host? On which port? Let me show.
32.
Curl local host 32768. Perfect, right? So which port you should add in the security rule? Now you have forwarded, made it available on 32768. You have to add that port which you have forwarded. 32768. 32768.
Remove S.
Right? This is your Nginx. This is how you can access. So now I'm accessing it on my EC2 host. Is it running on, is Nginx installed on my EC2 host?
No.
Right? It's coming from the container. That's the advantage. There's another advantage of container. If you need any services, let's say you need some services on your deployment machine, you don't need to install it right away. You could install it on a container. Right?
Ma'am, will it work for container IP and then port 80 now if we forwarded the port?
It worked, right?
Okay.
0 is the IP address of the container. If it is working in container only, you can bring it outside.
It is due to the previous container ID or it's due to 10?
This is the IP address of 10E.
Okay. Okay, got it.
It inspected 10E. 17.03 is the IP address of 10E container.
Okay, ma'am.
This is the IP. The other old container IP is 102. Of course, that is working as well inside internally. That is 02 IP of other container.
Okay, okay.
Got this concept of port forwarding, everyone? Any more questions or confusions? So we have to forward using capital P whenever you create it. And this is called free port forwarding, where you forward the port to where you forward container port to a random port on the host. What if you want to forward it to a port of your own choice? So that's where comes this one. Let's say I would like to forward it to 9090. First host port, then container. Container port is same. See here, you don't get confused. How many containers can run on port 80? That port 80 is specific to each container. All are Nginx containers. So every container, its own port, IP and port 80. This is like 80. Okay, this is forwarded to 32768. Okay, this one you can forward it to some other available port on the host. Host ports you can't keep same, right? At this time I'm forwarding to 9090. Understood? These are not host ports. It's a port of every own container. Imagine that's a port of every individual machine kind of. Right? Is this picture clear? This is using capital P. This is using small p. I'm just reducing the size, but understand that's a case sensitive. Right? And also you have to provide this is called free port forwarding. Free port. This is called binding port forwarding. This is, let's say this one is not forwarded, no port forwarded. So it can't be accessed outside. Third container. Is this clear, everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So let me forward this. So third container. Yes, this is forwarded to 9090 of the host. This is 32768. Now 9090. 9090 should be added to the security rules. 9090. Let's come back. 9090 is not there. So add this port. 9090. Right? So it's available. So this is coming from one container. This is coming from another container. That's the beauty of port forwarding. On the same EC2 host, I can access Nginx on multiple ports, each being forwarded by different container. Only one image. Sorry. Docker images. Only one image, which is creating 3 containers, no port forwarding, free port forwarding, and binding port forwarding. This is very, very important. Having clarity on this part is most important because we use this concept throughout. Of course, not like individual port forwarding, but like I said, this is the basic concept behind how you expose your applications in the cluster for high availability. We will use this. Okay, I am teaching you the concept now. We will use this for our address book. We'll use it in many ways. We are going to do many things with port forwarding. It's not completed. Just I have explained you the concept. We will use it in different ways. We'll see. Are we good to proceed?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Alan. In the backend, it will be running on 80 only. It just forwarded that port. Means whatever content, whatever data available on this port 80 of the container can be available on this. That's all. See, the whole point is containers are running in a secure network. That's for safety because it's not that everyone will dive into the containers and access everything. So, but still that port is needed. So we don't expose the entire container. Container is still secure. Only that particular port we forward it to the host. Means whatever content, whatever data or any service running on that particular 80 is only exposed to 32768. Not the entire container is again not exposed. That's the point behind. So yes, from containers perspective, it's running on 80. That's why we are just axing that. It's like port mapping that to 32768, and we see that service and access that service or pays whatever it is on that port. That's all. If it is not running on that 80 port inside the container, it wouldn't be available on 32768 also. If you stop the container, you don't see, or else if you stop the service, go inside the container, stop the service, you don't see anything on 32768. It's actually running inside the container, just mapping that port. We can't expose the entire container for security reasons. Only that port, that's called port mapping. Got it, Alan? Hope I answered your question. Right. So that's about port mapping, which is very important, port mapping or port exposing, whatever you call it. And then we have something called backup of the container.